Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. There is college football to be played this week. It's week 0. It is the final week of fall camp for Purdue before it moves into game week prep for the season opener against Fresno State. I'm recording this here on Sunday evening, less than 13 days away. By the time you're listening to this, it's 12 or fewer days until the 100th season of football inside Ross-Ade Stadium begins, and a new era of Purdue football gets underway with Ryan Walters at the helm. Last week, we talked about the defense a little bit, previewed that in depth, position group by position group, and we're going to do the same thing on offense today. It is a little bit of a new look offense for Purdue this year, but this is a program that is known for offense, and Purdue certainly hopes to keep a big-time offense going in to the future. We will get into that here momentarily. Real quick, if you don't already, be sure to follow the show on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond, live tweeting every game this year per usual. We'll have all our thoughts for you on there. Plenty of pregame, postgame thoughts throughout the week, all of that. You'll want to be subscribed there. You'll want to follow there. You'll want to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We will be going to twice a week here once the season gets going. I think we'll just do one next week, talk about Fresno, and then have some season predictions as well. But then after that, we'll get into 2 episodes a week. I look forward to that more than you know. It is the best time of the year. And feel free to reach out. Let me know your thoughts. You can tweet at me, send me a DM on Twitter @BoilersBeyond, or you can always email the show, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. Wanted to get into this Purdue offense here today. It's going to look definitively different than what Jeff Brom ran at Purdue. It's interesting. This is considered the air raid offense to a degree. Purdue's really running with the branding of that. Graham Harrell, of course, is branded as an air raid guy. He played for Mike Leach at Texas Tech. Not all air raids are the same. And we talked about this, 3 or 4 weeks ago on the show maybe, that I don't know. This Purdue offense is not going to look like a Mike Leach, Hal Mummy air raid offense. That's not what it's going to be. I actually think that at the end of the season, we will see that this Purdue team runs the ball more than what a lot of Jeff Brom's teams did at Purdue. I have a feeling that's going to be the case. Graham Harrell ran the ball more than he threw the ball at West Virginia last year. I think we're going to see a pretty balanced attack here. I think the air raid, is going to be a lot more instilled in the pass game with just the principles of the pass game and what Purdue tries to do there more so than an actual, play calling offensive philosophy. Purdue returns a handful of starters on offense, but look, this is going to be a new look group. And that starts at quarterback because after 2.5 years of Aiden O'Connell running the show at Purdue, there's a new quarterback in town. Hudson Card arrives from Texas, one of the more anticipated transfer quarterbacks around the nation. A guy that Purdue really wanted. You've heard Ryan Walters and Graham Harrell talk a lot about how, in their evaluations, they thought that Hudson Card was the best quarterback available in the portal throughout the country. Time will tell if their thoughts are correct there, but Hudson Card's a guy who Purdue is really excited about. And, early indications from camp reports, from the Big Ten Network, camp visit day that they did, very solid. This is a guy who was a high 4-star recruit out of high school. He was never quite able to grasp the Texas job fully. 2021, he competed with Casey Thompson there. Then last year competed with Quinn Ewers, a former top recruit, number 1 overall recruit. So he had some good quarterbacks competing against him, especially with Ewers. 194 pass attempts in his time in Austin, 65% completion rate, very solid. 11 touchdowns to 2 picks. You'll take a 5.5 ratio there any day. That's pretty solid. Purdue needs him to be more than solid this year, if you ask me. You look at it on paper. The receiver room, and we'll talk about the receivers here momentarily, but the receiver room doesn't quite have that high-end talent that it's had in recent memory. I don't think there's a Rondale Moore here. I don't think there's a combo of David Bell and Milton Wright or a Charlie Jones. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think Card's going to have to play at a pretty high level for Purdue to reach a bowl game. I think he's certainly capable of it. I think the offense could be a really good fit for him. One of the things that he gets praised about quite a bit is his accuracy. And if you're really going with the air raid principles in the passing game, it's a lot of yards after catch. It's a lot of short passes, yards after catch. And if you can hit guys in stride, put it in that perfect spot, you set them up the best for yards after catch. If it's behind them, if it's high and they've got to jump, if it's low and they've got to go to the ground, then you get into problems. Obviously, if it's too far out in front, well, you might be throwing a pick. I think this should be a good fit for Hudson Card. Now, he's going to have to hit the deep ball. I think he has the tools to do it. He has the arm talent to do it. But one thing I'm really interested here to see with Hudson Card is, he has the ability to extend with his feet. We saw it a few times at Texas. It's not something we saw a ton of. He's not going to be that Lamar Jackson, Cam Newton type who runs more than he passes. But I'm going to be curious to see how much he does that, because I don't know that Purdue can really let him do it too much. Purdue's other quarterbacks have no experience to speak of. And if Hudson Card goes out with an injury, which, theoretically running the ball more would result in more injuries, I don't know where Purdue goes from there. Bennett Meredith transferred in from Arizona State after one season, so he's still a redshirt freshman. In the grand scheme of things, he's a very young quarterback. When he did his media availability, he spoke with a lot of confidence. He played at a high level in high school, Hoover High School in Alabama, made famous by MTV Two-A-Days. He's played at a high level there. But, how ready is he to play right now? As we record this on Sunday, it's been semi-circulated that he was arrested last week for driving under the influence in West Lafayette. Who knows what the ramifications of that will be? I don't know that Purdue's going to announce a suspension publicly. I think they're probably going to handle it internally, but, who knows? Is that a game? Is that 2 games? I don't know, but, he's going to be around this year. And if someone goes down, if Card goes down, Meredith is probably your guy. You've got Ryan Brown as a true freshman, 3-star guy. He's a year old for his class, went to prep school for a year, had a real roundabout high school prep, high school experience. Kind of played all over the place, but he's got a nice resume. Put up some real big numbers in the state of Florida last year. But again, how ready is he? It's a big jump, even from probably the best high school, or one of the 2-3 best high school states in the country in Florida. It's still a big jump to the Big Ten. How ready is he? You've got Kyle Adams, the walk-on, West Lafayette native, transferred in from James Madison ahead of last year. Again, I don't know a ton about him. He's probably the number 4 guy. But when you look at this room, it's really important for Hudson Card to stay healthy. Because if he's not out there, I don't know that Purdue has a guy that you can win with. Maybe they do. Maybe Meredith is that guy. Maybe Brown, as a true freshman, is ready to hit the ground running. You never know. But just historically speaking here, I don't know that going into a season with a redshirt freshman, a true freshman, and a walk-on is exactly ideal. Time will tell, though. And a lot of what the quarterback room does has to do with the wide receiver play because, as I said, I don't know that Purdue has that elite all Big Ten type of wide receiver that it's had for the last 5 years. Going back to Rondale Moore in 2018, Purdue's had that guy on its roster. Whether it was Moore at the start of 2019 before Bell broke out, a couple years of him, and then Charlie Jones, Purdue's had really good wide receiver play. TJ Sheffield's your most experienced guy coming into the season. Over 800 yards, 9 career touchdown grabs. He's got some experience. He's played a lot of football for you. I'm very interested to see if he plays, inside in the slot or if he gets pushed out to outside receiver again this year. Last year, he played a lot of outside, mostly due to necessity. Purdue didn't really have a guy that was capable of playing outside, other than Charlie Jones. So where does he kind of line up? I don't know. You got to maximize his ability if you can, but, if you're just trying to get your best receivers on the field, do you need to push him outside to get someone in at slot to have your best 3 or 4 out on the field? I don't know the answer to that, but we'll find out soon. Purdue lost Jamal Edrine for the season. That was a big loss early on in fall camp. FAU transfer, as you'll remember, he tore his ACL a couple weeks ago. Big loss for Purdue. He was a real outside target, someone Purdue needed, someone who, it seemed like could be one of Purdue's top receivers, if not the top receiver. There was a lot of buzz around him. Unfortunately, that's for naught. He is out for the year. So then you look at guys like Mershawn Rice, Abdur-Rahman Yassin, a couple of guys who came in with some real fanfare, and they've shown some flashes, but that's kind of all it's been, a flash or two. There's not been a ton of consistent production there, but they're both real outside targets. Purdue needs that. How about Elijah Canyon, a guy who transferred in from Auburn ahead of last year, only got on the field for a handful of snaps against Penn State, injured, done for the year. He's big. He's 6'4", a real, big, tall, long target on the outside. I think there's some real potential there, but can he stay healthy? And if he's healthy, can he produce? Because, in fairness, we've not seen it yet. One of the guys getting some buzz, Deion Burks. The last time we saw him, he was getting carted off at the Citrus Bowl, but he's healthy. He's all good. He's good to go now, and he's a guy who's gotten quite a bit of buzz. Could he be a guy who really breaks out at the slot? He's a guy who I think in this offense should be a good fit. Lots of yards after catch potential there. He can really move. You've got Jaden Dixon-Veal, a guy from the JUCO ranks that transferred in, flipped from Oregon State super late in the cycle. Is he ready to play a role? You never quite know with JUCO guys. How ready is he? And you've got some really young dudes. Curtis DeVille, Zion Steptoe, both redshirted last year. You'll remember Steptoe had a nice spring game as a true freshman back in April 2022. Freezing day at Ross-Ade that was. But he looked good then. How ready is he now? I don't know. Jerron Tibbs, a true freshman at a Cathedral. He's gotten some good reviews early on, but, is he going to see the field as a true freshman? I'm not sure. Armad Branch, a nice 11th hour pickup on the recruiting trail. But overall, this is a group that has a lot of names, but it lacks the proven production that I think you would like to have. Now, it's a new era of college football a bit too. With the way the transfer market works, you don't always get to have as much production as you might have in the past coming into seasons. But this is going to be a big spot. We're going to know pretty quick who Ryan Walters trusts the most, and then we go from there. But who those guys are going to be interesting to see. The tight end room could be a real position of strength in the pass game for Purdue, though. I'm looking forward to seeing how they're used in this offense. Another reason why I kind of like to make sure to note that this offense is a little bit different than your traditional air raid is because the tight ends are going to be used. In a Mike Leach air raid offense, the real traditional air raid, there aren't tight ends. It's pretty much 4 wide with a running back, or 5 wide. There aren't tight ends. But the majority of the time in Graham Harrell's career, he's used 11 personnel, a running back, a tight end, 3 wide receivers. You heard Seth Dagey during his interview, the tight ends coach last week. I thought it was interesting. He talked about how all of his tight ends need to be able to line up out wide, more in the traditional inline tight end role, and then at the H-back spot. How those guys are moved around, I'm very interested to see that. I expect to see tight ends a lot, though. Garrett Miller's back from an injury, and how healthy is he? You hope he's 100% because he's real athletic. He's a guy who's shown some nice flashes. That touchdown catch and run against Northwestern in 2020, in the upset of Michigan State a year later, 8 catches for 74 yards. He had a big day. But, last year when he was really ready to make a move, he got hurt in fall camp, missed the whole year. If that athleticism is all the way back, he could be a guy who's getting drafted, in April. He's that intriguing of a prospect. You still have Paul Paferi around, big target on the outside, converted quarterback. It was funny. I was looking at stats. He only had 10 receptions last year. It really felt like there were more than that. He's much more of a pass catcher than a blocker, but I think that's the way they're going to try to go with this scheme a little bit. I think you're going to see these guys in the pass game. And you've got some young guys in this room who we haven't seen much from, but they all fit that mold of the pass catch first, athletic tight end. Drew Bibber, Max Clare, a couple of holdovers from the previous regime. George Burhan is a really athletic tight end, Mount Vernon kid, Indianapolis area. He was a guy that it seemed like Louisville really wanted to flip. He held with Purdue. I don't think he would have if he didn't feel pretty good that this offense was really going to use the tight end. These guys are all that athletic, pass-catching tight end type. I think you're going to see Purdue keep adding that, but I'm fascinated to see how they get utilized in this offense. Switching gears to the run game a bit, when's the last time you felt this good about a Purdue running back room entering a season? It's been a while. You've got Devin Mockabee coming back this year. Last year, he was one of the best stories in college football. Well, that might be a step too far. But in the Big Ten, he was a really good story. Former walk-on, started the season 4th on the depth chart. He broke through 968 yards last year. He's ready to become a legit, well, he already did become a legit, RB1, a legit lead tailback on this roster. He's on scholarship now, and, he's ready to make some moves and put together seasons that, Purdue running backs haven't often done. He wants to be Purdue's first 1,000-yard rusher since Corey Sheets, and if he's healthy, it's quite possibly does it. I think he'll get used more in the passing game this year. He's a guy you want to get the ball in space to. He's tough to bring down. They talked last year about his nickname being Soap in high school because he's slippery. He is. He bounces off a lot of tackles. He's got that unconventional running motion, but it works. I'm excited to see what he can do this year. He's your true number 1 running back. But new to this running back position is Tyrone Tracy. The natural position he played in high school was running back. So, he started his career at wide receiver at Iowa. And you can understand why a guy might not necessarily thrive as a wide receiver in Iowa's system. He comes to Purdue. It didn't quite work. So I think this is a really good move to get him to running back because Tyrone Tracy has really good athletic ability. He's a good athlete to have out there. And if you can get him the ball more and just hand it to him and let him go instead of making him get open first, hey, that's a positive. You saw some nice flashes of him as a good athlete last year. This year he's going to have the ball in his hands more often. I think he can do a really good job. I think if there's an X factor to this running back room, it's Tyrone Tracy. I am really excited to see what he can do, because if he is a legitimate addition at the running back spot, and he's a legitimate guy who can get you double-digit carries in a game, man, you put less pressure on Maccabee, and you make things a lot better for Purdue this year. Dylan Downing is still around. I think he's a little bit more role dependent. He's not quite as much of a speedster as the other two. He's more of a grind for extra yards type of back. Nothing wrong with that. I think he can be used in short yardage spots. I think you can use him at the goal line. I think he's probably better suited, though, as a number 3 back than a number 2. I think the floor of this running back room is pretty high. I think you do have to worry about injuries. I sound like a broken record here, You have those 3, and then you've got a couple of true freshmen. You've got the Christian Womack kid, a late addition from Texas. You've got Mondrell Dean, another late addition to the recruiting class. Gigantic running back, 6'3", 240. He is huge. So with those guys, how ready are they? That's always the question. Running back is the easiest position to transition from high school to college. But what the ceiling of this running back room is probably depends on the offensive line, because there are some real both reasons for optimism and reasons for skepticism here. You lose Spencer Holstead, Eric Miller, and Sione Finau, all to the transfer portal. Those guys all depart. I think you would have liked to keep all 3. Certainly with Holstead, he was a really good guard for you. Miller and Finau are, more replacement level guys, but they're good pieces to have, good experienced pieces. Now you've got Gus Hartwig's back at center. Mohamed Musa is back at left tackle. Marcus Bowe is back. He started at right guard last year. Hartwig's probably not going to be ready to start the season. Just reading the tea leaves there. He hurt his knee against Northwestern last year, and it was a pretty serious knee injury. When is he going to be ready to go? Time will tell. Whether it's, week 3, whether it's October, you don't really want it to be much after that, but he's going to be a big one to keep your eye on, because Josh Kaltenberger, who stepped in for him, he was hurt in practice as well. How serious it is doesn't sound too bad, but it's probably a question, will he be ready for Fresno State or not? Because if not, that's 2 centers out. You do, as I said, return Musa and Bowe. They're going to anchor the tackle spots. Musa figured out left tackle last year. He did a solid job. Bowe's going to kick out from right guard to right tackle. I'm interested to see how that works. I think he'll be just fine there, but you lose a really good guard there. You've got Daniel Johnson to back them both up. He was good enough in limited snaps last year. Kent State transfer. He'll be that kind of swing tackle who can play either way. There are a ton of transfer portal pieces to fit into this room. Jalen Grant from Bowling Green, Preston Nichols from UNLV. Those 2 guys are pure guards. Where they line up, time will tell. Austin Johnson, the Mizzou transfer, has some or is he the Colorado transfer? He might be the Colorado transfer. I'm getting confused here. The Mizzou transfer is the long snapper. Austin Johnson's the Colorado transfer. He sounds like he's going to be the center while Gus Hartwig is out. If Kaltenberger comes back first, it'll be interesting to see who takes that spot. You've got Ben Farrell, the Indiana Wesleyan guy. I don't know if he's going to play guard or tackle. He's probably your Swiss Army knife guy who can fill in somewhere he's needed, probably can play both. I don't have a great feel for this offensive line. I think you have some decent depth on the interior, but you can't afford any injuries at tackle, and you probably can't afford any more injuries at center. So you're good at the guard spot. Purdue's got to build some depth at tackle, though. It's hard to do. It's really hard to do, but you look at ways to elevate the program. Building up depth on the offensive line is a big critical part of, raising your program's level. Just some overall thoughts. The run-pass balance of this offense is going to be really interesting to watch, because I had a listener reach out over email about this too. Ryan Walters' defense partially was what it was because of the way Illinois played on offense. It was a very ball control heavy offense. They had one of the nation's best running backs. That style bodes well for defenses. Look at Iowa. Look at Wisconsin historically. That type of football complements each other pretty well. How well does it mesh when Purdue wants to go a little bit faster on offense, when Purdue wants to air it out a little bit more? I don't know. How the offense and defense mesh is going to be really interesting to watch, because if you're going to try to play the style that Ryan Walters does, where you're real aggressive and you're getting after it there, well, that's great, and I think that's the way to do it. But if you're going 3 and out a lot on offense, or your drives are just taking a minute or two, you're putting your defense in a tough spot. I'm going to be interested to see how that works. I don't have a great feel for it. Time will tell there. As I said, I think Hudson Card, for Purdue to overachieve, go over that 5.5 win total, get to a bowl, flirt with, the top 3 or so in the West. I think you need Hudson Card to be, among the best in the Big Ten. You need some receivers to show out. You need the offensive line to hold up, but you need Hudson Card to be really good. The run game's going to be solid. I feel good about the run game. I don't know that it's going to carry you, though. I think you still need the pass game to be quite effective. But that's what I'm most excited to see. I did want to touch here real quick before the Q&A, and I did have a question about this. We talked defense last week. We talked about the corner room being a little bit thin in terms of, real experienced guys. And that room took a hit this week with Jamari Brown leaving the team. First reported by Golden Black's Tom Dienhart. Unclear as to, the reason for it. Lots of speculation. None of that I'm going to traffic in. But a significant loss for Purdue. Brown was fine. He had his ups and downs. He was a fine number 2 corner for Purdue sometimes last year. He had plenty of downs. You look, the Illinois game last year was a disaster. Kind of look through some old tweets of mine just to, remember all the ups and downs there. But he was what he was. He wasn't great. He wasn't perfect, but he was an experienced depth piece, and that was someone you probably didn't want to lose. I don't know. There's a lot of buzz that he'd been beaten out by some of the transfers. Maybe he has been. I have no idea. I can't speak to it. I'm not there. But nonetheless, Purdue's down to 6 scholarship players at corner. One of those is a true freshman in Zion Gunn. You've got Gunn, and then you've got Marquise Wilson, Markevius Brown, Salim Turner Muhammad, Braxton Myers, Botros Alessandro. That's 5 transfers. How good are they all? We'll see. There seems to be a lot of excitement around Brown and Markevius Brown and Marquise Wilson. We'll see what they look like. But to have that little experience there, it's a little scary. You cannot afford injuries. You need these guys to all hit. Turner Muhammad's been banged up a little bit. Is he going to be ready for the start of the season? I'm not sure. So it's going to be interesting to see here. I don't think Brown, it's not like you're losing a star player in Brown, but you are losing someone who you could put out there and play. And that's a big one. Couple of good questions here, just two of them, both from some longtime listeners. One here got a lot of love on Twitter. Will we see Devin Mockabee challenge the 1,000-yard mark this year with a full slate of games? Noted that he got close last year with two-thirds, playing in about two-thirds of the games. I will note, he did play in 13 games last year. That part is important to note. He wasn't the full-time guy for the first few. You look at it was Indiana State, he got his first action. Syracuse, he played a bit. FAU, and he had that breakout against Minnesota when he had that long run to help seal the game. I, of course, base everything off 12 games here. Bowl games are gravy. I base things off 12 games. So if he plays in all 12, stays healthy, I think he does reach 1,000. To this point, there's only been 8 instances in Purdue history of a running back reaching 1,000 yards in a season. Most recently, Corey Sheets in 2008. It's not like it's a sure thing. That's not very frequent. But I think if he stays healthy, that goes a long way. I think he can do it if he stays healthy. And I think what will play a big role here in a little bit of a convoluted way is Tyrone Tracy. Because if Tracy can take a bit of the load off Mockabee, he's probably less likely to get hurt. To a certain degree, it's kind of a numbers game. If he can take fewer hits, I think that goes a long way. Maybe keep him a little bit healthier, and then you have some games along the way where he can break out. A couple of big runs go a long way there. And then finally, the last topic to touch on was, what's the deal with the beef on Twitter between Bret Bielema and Ryan Walters? A good one there, a good friend of the show, sending that one over. Look, this is one, if you missed the headline last week, Bielema said something that was a little weird, but he made some comments that, he didn't want Walters to play the Missouri defense at Illinois. I don't really know what that means. Walters has kind of had this style that he's progressed over his time. But, this isn't the only incident where Bielema has made some comments about Walters. Bielema got asked about that at Big Ten Media Day. He just said he's kind of sassy on Twitter. That's part of it. He's owning it. So, okay. I think to a certain degree here, Bielema's trying to stand up for his program. He's trying to make sure that the Illinois program gets credit for what it accomplished last year and not just, give Ryan Walters all the love. Probably, a bit of an ego thing there. I get it. They're college football coaches. They've all got egos. I don't read a tremendous amount into it, but I do think there's a little rivalry growing here. And, Purdue, Illinois, how much of a rivalry is it? There's a trophy involved. Not that far apart, but, how much of a rivalry really is it? Up to you. But I think there could be a little bit, I don't know that bad blood is the right word, but there could be some intrigue here between these two programs moving forward as Bielema and Walters lead their programs into 2023 and beyond. Getting close to the season here, as I said, next week on the show, we're going to talk about Fresno State. I'll make some season predictions, and we'll do a big mailbag. Any questions you have about this Purdue team, send them my way. Do that on Twitter at BoilersBeyond. Email them to me at boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. And I've thought about doing some Twitter spaces as well here and there. A good friend of the show, Mackie Maniacs, talked to me about that. Interested in doing it. So it won't replace the podcast. Don't worry. It won't replace the podcast at all, but may just pop into Twitter spaces here and there. Week of Fresno State might do something, just hang out, talk Purdue football with a longtime listener of the show. I know the guy behind it. He knows his stuff, so could be something fun. We'll see how it goes, but let me know your thoughts on that too. That's all I've got for today. Thank you, as always, for those of you who listen, and for those of you who have spent the entire summer listening to the show, thank you. We are finally to the best time of the year. it is college football season. So until next time, guys, take care and enjoy the Week 0 games on Saturday.